Mistress, are you sure you want all the Rapture movies? I mean, there's like 1,000 of them.
Of course I want all of the Rapture movies! I want them all as soon as fucking possible, and if you miss one, I will fucking know. Oh, that felt different that time. What the fuck is going on? Oh, God. The old compound? What the fuck? And blonde. I'm blonde? This must be season 1! Sometime around the memory run review. I wondered why I had that blackout.
It sounds like the mistress is having a psychotic breakdown.
Again?
And since these possession episodes take place right after the season 2 finale, when Teddy betrayed me and Richard Dawkins shot me, that means I can get some revenge. Teddy!
Yes, mistress. I'm just getting some music tracks together for your next review.
Can you do that with a broken leg?
Probably.
Good. Hey, Teddy! It's been a while!
Yes, mistress. It's been a long 10 minutes since I last saw you. Ah!
Finishing reviewing Biggle's adventures in time in her compound one night, Guillemette Hagan was shot dead by a gang of strident atheists. She found herself in the past, facing a reflection that was her own, and driven by an unknown force to review exploitation films from the 1930s. Her only guide on this journey is Alistair the Homeless Bastard, a drunken actor who only turns up in the Freaks Review. And so, Hagan finds herself leaping from reviewer to reviewer, watching ancient exploitation movies and hoping that her next leap will be the leap home.
What was that for?
You'll find out.
You better hope that I don't get the opportunity to betray you, because now I will.
Greetings, gentle viewers. I should not have an HD camera this early on. Minion, once this review is finished, put this fucking thing in storage until after the Rapture movies arrive. Because this is technically a leap, I'm going to talk about an obscure 1930s movie. And because I leapt into myself, I'm going to talk about an obscure 1930s movie that glorifies a divinely ordained dictatorship. There's a connection there. It's just subtle enough to fly under the radar. Are we sure this is a 1930s movie? Because the credits are nowhere near random enough, and a bit too short. It's the new president swearing in. Because it's the 1930s, and to make sure he didn't get lost in the crowds, they segregated the stock footage from the rest of the movie by way of these fades. Look at him, it's like he doesn't realize he's JFK, but 30 years early.
Good night, Mr. President. The inauguration went off with a bang.
Bomb threats. Things never change.
Judd, one of your constituents outside is very anxious to see you.
Oh, I don't want to see anybody. My hand is worn out now.
Well, you better see this fellow. He's insistent and he's armed.
Oh, it's the Tea Party. And he wants to know why his Muslim commie nigger faggot slut-killing bomb didn't go off. Actually, no, it's the president's nephew, who for some reason takes a weird dislike to Derek Jacobi from Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet.
I see your nephew is inclined to the military.
Did I keep my promise, Judd?
Well, I'm in the White House, and considerably worried
Why?
when I think of all the promises I made the people to get elected.
Oh, you had to make some promises. By the time they realize you're not going to keep them, your term will be over.
Should we have had this conversation before now? And in private?
Beekman, do you realize that you're the youngest secretary a president ever had?
I appreciate the honor, sir.
Well, we need young blood around here.
Mr. President, you do realize that you were the youngest president until the 1960s, don't you?
Beekman's rather a long name. You mind if I call you Beek?
Not at all, sir.
All right. I'll call you Beek and you call me Major, okay?
He's stupid, shallow, and obsessed with nicknames. I think I should start thinking about W references, just in case he paints his face or tries to become the Antichrist. And why nickname him Beek anyway? Clearly, Thin Johnny Depp is much more appropriate. Anyway, Beek is sent to escort this woman to a late-night private meeting with the President.
You're my first official duty.
The President likes his sloppy seconds. It's a habit he picked up from Andrew Johnson. At the President's first meeting with reporters, we see the true depths of the country's problems. There's prohibition, organized crime, the Great Depression, and worst of all, someone's developed illegal cloning technologies. How else would you explain this guy standing behind himself? Or this angry reporter who's clearly an older version of Beek? Of course, maybe that is Beek from the future. Time travel would explain weird cloning technology being around in the 1930s. Okay, Gabriel over the White House, I've worked out how your weird elements actually make sense. So continue with your perfectly normal story about God possessing the President of the United States, making him a murderous fascist dictator, holding the world to ransom with a doomsday weapon, and how this is a good thing.
If you don't stop asking questions, we won't have any place to sleep for the next 4 years.
Well, boys, can I be of any further service to you?
How about a glass of beer?
Boys, remember, this is the White House.
Oh, that's right. I thought it was the Senate.
You know, I enjoyed the president's speech. It was straightforward and to the point.
Well, sure.
I think the reporter had a stroke.
Midnight, were the stars and you.
A quill pen. Oh, jeez, it's been the 20th century for 30 years already. 20th century it up and use a newer pen. Oh, good. I, of course, expected that to happen because I am God. But it's nice to have confirmation every so often.
Now, you sit there. Don't you look around either.
We shall now switch you by remote control to the camp of the unemployed in Central Park, New York City, from which you will hear John Bronson, the leader of America's unemployed army, address an open letter to the people of America.
Yeah.
These guys camped out and being angry at the government are a lot like the Occupy movement. The biggest difference is that they have guns and aren't afraid to threaten to use them. That's probably why they were able to get an unbroken 3 minutes in popular media for their speech, while the President acts like an idiot and talks over it.
People of America
What overcoat do
are
you want
hopelessly
to wear?
involved in
Well, the overcoat the President of the United States always wears when he goes to the United States Naval Academy.
Keeping you prosperous.
I didn't realize cars back then could drive that fast. Yeah, the footage is sped up, but could they theoretically even reach that speed? Is this the equivalent of watching the West Wing and seeing the motorcade travel at warp speed?
You know you're the first president of the United States to drive his own car?
And the first to break the sound barrier. If you didn't have me explaining what was going on here, you'd assume these guys are gangsters trying to evade the fucking police.
What are we doing, 95? 98, sir. You told me we'd do 110.
Well, I'll serve that jackass right. The President's name is Hammond, by the way. So know this. I know enough about Top Gear to make a joke, but I care so little about that fucking show that I won't.
Beek! Beek, Willie!
Di? They can't tell me the truth.
Dr. Eastman speaking. I can tell you nothing at this time.
Because I've never been told how to use a telephone!
Well, Doctor, what is your opinion?
I'd say it's merely a matter of hours.
Do you concur in that opinion, Doctor?
I'm afraid he's beyond any human help.
Oh, he'll be fine. They were great at many things, but remember, Winston Churchill and Neville Chamberlain were not licensed physicians. Oh, sorry, I'm talking over his apotheosis. Ah, he wants to complain that someone's playing Handel's Messiah at him.
Did you ring, Miss Bright?
Why, no, Doctor.
But the bell in the study rang.
Why, the bell in the study is...
I heard what you said, but the doctors are wrong. Judd Hammond isn't going to die.
Judd Hammond is going to talk about himself in the third person and inspire Bob Dole to go into politics. Bob Dole.
The president is still unconscious.
Oh, we've printed that one line for weeks. No one believes it.
I was here when Wilson was sick and Harding, too, and no one ever dared hide the news from us.
I should say not.
The president is still in a coma. That's all I can tell you.
Oh, come on.
Gentlemen.
Beekman, you've got to tell us something new, even if you have to lie about it. Has he talked? What does he look like? What does he eat? Tell us something.
Please, tell us anything. We can't be expected to make shit up and write about it. So eventually the press leave, ready to make shit up and write about it, and accidentally start modern American political reporting.
This situation is getting too much for me. If I'm going on with this, I've got to have help. I've got to have somebody to share the burden with me.
What burden?
President Hammond has been perfectly well for 2 weeks.
I just can't handle doing this much nothing alone on my salary. I need help. So having been told that the president's acting strangely driven, burning with a divine fire, the staff were understandably worried.
Judd, why have you shut us out?
What's the trouble, Miss Malloy? You seem upset about something.
But dear, don't you know how worried we've been?
Jeez, it's even worse than I thought. He's turned into a Big Bang Theory character. So he calls the cabinet together to talk about the Occupy Tea Party movement marching on Washington.
Gentlemen, I refuse to call out the army against the people of the United States.
And I refuse to accept that.
Discussion on this subject is closed.
Now be careful. I might resign on you.
Your resignation is accepted.
Oh, well, now, wait a minute, Judge. I was only
Your
suggesting...
resignation is accepted. You have my permission to withdraw.
I say, I haven't seen orthodox levels reach this level of since Lord Reginald Brinkley had Beethoven's Fifth played in reverse. It was most mirthful, but in such bad taste. This is Nick Diamond. Al Capone cost too much, so they got his non-union Mexican equivalent. So what did Depression-era gangsters do to pass the time? Why, reminisce over old mugshots, of course.
I'm much better looking now than I was then. Especially the profile. Don't you think?
You filled out a bit.
Well, that scene's about 2 lines away from being the start of a gay porno. You know, things were just classier in the 1930s. People don't even have gun storage rooms anymore. So the head of the Occupy Tea Party movement is brought in to meet Nick. He wants them to call off the march. He thinks the police are far more useful guarding the camps than interfering with his crime. So he offers the head a roll of money and a cigarette case.
That ain't my brand.
I think that's the only time a pipe's been used as a fuck you. Well, except for that Julius Caesar thing.
We're here! We're queer! We're fabulous! Don't fuck with us! We're here! We're queer! We're fabulous! Don't fuck with us! We're here! We're queer! We're fabulous! Don't fuck with us! We're here!
Oh, 1930s, you were so homophobic. So how the fuck was he the only person hit? That was either amazingly good or amazingly bad shooting.
Don't mind me, boys. Carry on to Washington.
Glory, glory, hallelujah!
I meant after you called me an ambulance and and dragged us out of your fucking path. Oh God! And don't just sing louder to cover my screams. So the president decides to visit the Occupy Tea Party movement as they camp near Baltimore.
Mr. President, I'm responsible for your personal safety, and I refuse to let you go alone into that camp.
Sloden, you heard what happened to Secretary of State Brooks?
Yes, sir. You had me shoot him myself. I'll shut up now. So the crowd demand work, and the president promises to enlist them in what will become his own personal army. They'll start by fixing roads, baking bread, anything the country needs to build demand for private industry, and then shortly afterwards replace the police, start with the black uniforms, and have trials without juries. I wish I'd seen this years ago. This has so many ideas for taking over your own country. I just arrived at the clothing machine and started killing people.
Mr. President, your address to Congress on the construction army.
My address to Congress? What's this? Who wrote this?
Why, you did, Mr. President.
Oh, no, Miss Malloy, I didn't write this. I never saw it. Oh, yes, my address to Congress.
He didn't know his own words, Beak.
What?
And then he lifted his head, for all the world as if he were listening. There was something in the room that made me shiver. And then he just smiled and said, yes, of course.
What do you think it means?
Beak, I fear the president might be fucking nuts. Nah, they just assume that God's possessing him. If this was most other countries, I'd be complaining about how unrealistic them jumping to that conclusion was.
Gabriel over the White House.
I just had this brilliant fucking idea.
Will not allow any talking monkey take my place.
Fuck. First I'm nearly killed, then I'm turned into an avatar, and now I'm seeing things. Looks like I chose the wrong week to quit being George W. Bush.
Don't look at me. I'm irrelevant.
The cabinet meet in secret and discuss how they can fuck over the president and his agenda when Beak arrives with letters for each of them, demanding their resignations.
How did Hammond know we were here?
Very strange. It's almost as though we always have our secret meetings in this room. So Congress calls for impeachment, and through the miracle of having a speech, Hammond not only defeats the impeachment, but walks out of there having suspended democracy and made himself dictator for life.
Mr. President, this is dictatorship. Senator Langham, words do not frighten me.
But the United States of America is a democracy.
I believe in democracy, as Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln believed in democracy. And if what I plan to do in the name of the people makes me a dictator, then it is a dictatorship based on Jefferson's definition of democracy. A government for the greatest good of the greatest number.
This Congress refuses to adjourn.
I think, gentlemen, you forget that I am still the President of these United States. And as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, it is within the rights of the President to declare the country under martial law.
So this is how democracy dies. With thunderous old men being impotently pissed off.
You know, there really should be more sympathetic portrayals of murderous god dictators in movies.
So having become God Emperor of the USA and well into dealing with the employment issue, he moves on to repealing the 18th Amendment and ending Prohibition. And in a radio address stops just short of threatening to feed Al Capone stand-in Nick Diamond his own kidneys.
You suppose he was talking about us?
Trust me, by the time he's finished with you, they could rename this movie Nick Diamond Under the White House. Anyway, because he wants to show that he has balls to match the president's, Nick Diamond meets with him in the White House. But he forgot one thing. Unless Kratos is involved, always bet on God.
I thought I was guaranteed there'd be no frame-up.
Diamond, I don't think you're quite ready for framing.
He's playing mind games.
Beekman, 1 hour after our first federal liquor store was opened, it was wiped out by the most dastardly demonstration of gangster defiance in the history of this country. Nick Diamond has declared war on the United States.
Okay, now we move on to the gangsters versus the theocratic states of America part of the movie, complete with bombings, mini-tanks attacking gangsters, and a drive-by at the White House. Somehow, seeing as there isn't a public road that close to the building. Okay, guns in this are magically ineffective. First they empty a fuckload of shots into a crowd and only manage to hit one man, and then they hit her about 100 times and she's still alive.
I think I feel well enough to be kissed.
I love how the movie assumes that we're following the love triangle that's happening between these three. The love triangle that they don't spell out clearly, and I'd be surprised to see if it was even in the fucking script.
Beekman, you're fired. I've got a better job for you. It's only a temporary one. I'm forming a mobile unit of the United States Army to be known as the Federal Police to eliminate gangsters. I want you to head that unit.
Yes, sir.
I need a man who has suffered a terrible personal hurt. A man whose energy and efficiency will be at white heat. A man ruthless and merciless. That is, of course, if you're willing to postpone your wedding for a while.
You mean you don't mind about us?
With no Congress to interfere, we might be able to arrange a wedding at the White House.
The job is, of course, dealing with gangsters and other criminals and probably everyone else they don't like in juryless trials and having them all shot. The groundwork for a future trial at The Hague was smoothly laid. I was just following orders. Heil They kill people by firing squad because gas chambers were so much less heroic. So now that all the criminals, and probably a great many innocent people, have been vacated from life and forcibly relocated to mass graves, it's time for the next phase of the plan. Creating a doomsday device. I really hope this fade lasted a long time in movie, because when the picture comes back, they've already finished that phase, and have moved on to forcing the rest of the world to become America's vassal states. You know, most political dramas, even the insane ones, would at least show them inventing the doomsday device. Or at least assume it's something the country had the whole time. But nah, not this. All this needs is a fade out and a change of scene. I wouldn't mind so much if they had one lying around. I mean, I had one, I used it to conquer Afghanistan, but inventing it off screen just feels cheap. But he is God, so machina ex deus, I suppose. Wow, so many fucking top hats. This looks like a wildly defective and confusing Monopoly board. Anyway, he brings the governments of the world together on board an American Navy vessel, and without their consent, broadcasts their secret meeting over the radio, and demands the immediate repayment of war debts from World War I.
For Germany to pay her debts means more taxes on her half-starved people. They may burst into open revolution.
Thus, act like you.
Who helped the little American colonies when they fought for their freedom? Who helped them with money?
Yes, France, you helped us. And America has cherished an affection for France ever since. But we paid you back.
I feel the sudden need to possess a historian. Be right back. What the fuck was that?
Nikola Tesla never invented a machine which constantly duplicates cats and hats. Oh, excellent. This looks suitably nerdy enough. Actually, America didn't repay France after the War of Independence. An American financier named James Swan assumed France's debt in 1795. So, America were then free of any foreign state debt.
Oh, I feel like a gun just took a dump in my brain. Now, shall we continue?
Faced with European leaders who have the temerity to be rational, the president tears up earlier signed military limiting agreements.
And from now on, America refuses to allow European nations or Asiatic nations to dictate how many ships and what kind of ships America shall have in the Navy which defends her lands and her people. I want you to take a last look at America's small Navy, at America's restricted and hampered Navy. A last look at an American Navy controlled by foreign powers. But when I get through with America's new Navy, America's own Navy, it'll make all your navies look like a lot of toy ships in a bathtub.
Is the President of the United States going to plunge the world into another war?
No, the United States must have the greatest Navy in the world because we want peace.
I can just imagine George Orwell watching this and getting ideas. And since America now has no limits on her Navy, because he said so, it's perfectly legal of them to have nuclear biplanes, which he's going to use to threaten the rest of the world into A, being peaceful, and B, give America money. His logic is a little bit flawed. He was complaining that other countries can't afford their debts because they are constantly spending money on their militaries, because equipment gets upgraded, and so must be replaced to keep up with everyone else. So he wants to end it all by inventing what are essentially nuclear-powered biplanes. But all he's done is convince the whole world that they should build their own nuclear biplanes to defend themselves against this mad bastard.
The next war will depopulate the earth. Invisible poison gases, inconceivably devastating explosives, annihilating death rays will sweep to utter destruction not only the men, but the children who would constitute another generation and the mothers who bear them.
At best, this is supposed to be a plea to everyone to submit to him, because if they don't, the future will be so much worse for everyone, making this the international equivalent of a protection racket. How ironic, given how much he hates gangsters. Anyway, he sounds really turned on.
The next war will be a terrible story of the failure of antiquated machinery and antiquated methods, of the horrifying destructiveness of the modern agencies of arms. Armies and navies will be destroyed from the air. And as these aeroplanes destroy armies and navies,
I'll be secure under a mountain range in Utah, laughing maniacally and wearing a uniform I designed myself.
They will destroy cities. They will destroy populations.
So when playing chicken with a deity-powered psychopath, the rest of the world blinks and signs an agreement destroying their militaries, leaving America and its nuclear biplanes the masters of the planet.
With this document, this covenant of Washington, the world takes its first real step to prevent our civilization from tottering, as did the forgotten civilizations before us.
Well, that cancer worked fast.
He must have died while carving it.
Oh, come on.
Well, that's what it says.
Look, if he was dying, he wouldn't bother to carve ARG. He'd just say it.
Beak's assistant is clearly still shaken up by a run-in with the drive-by. Check out her bulletproof brooch. So the president's dying, and the rest of the world leaders are kicking themselves that their assassin got time zones mixed up and didn't strike an hour earlier, when they weren't America's vassal states.
Does the President of the United States meet with your approval?
He's proved himself one of the greatest men who ever lived.
Aha, you see? If you'd had the window closed, then his soul couldn't have escaped and he would have lived forever. So, that was Gabriel over the White House. The sort of unironic, mainstream, dead serious attempt to show the positive and divine sides of fascism that you literally cannot make anymore. It's a creature of its time, and its time was batshit fucking crazy. It's the sort of film you have to watch with your mouth open because culture has changed so much since then that you can't quite process what you're seeing. It's unlike anything you've ever seen before, or anything you'll ever see again. Anyway, I'm the Amanda Hagan, and I'm fairly sure you know how the rest of that line goes by now. And I mean never to think about watching memory run ever again.